Welcome back to the Mountain Morning Show. I'm really happy to be talking with Austin Schofield from Salt Lake City 2026-2030. We have really big news that came out of Salt Lake City just yesterday.
Yep, that's right. The Salt Lake Olympic Exploratory Committee unanimously voted to move forward on bidding for the 2030 Olympics.
Unanimously?
That's right.
Why do you think that happened?
Well, the board itself has a lot of the board is comprised of a diverse group of people. There are community leaders, politicians, the governors on the board, as well as the president of the Utah Senate and the speaker of the Utah House and the mayor of Salt Lake City. There's also business leaders on the board, and there's also kind of a mix between business and unique areas of business and politics as well. There's Nally Gochner. She is a dean at the University of Utah, as well as she's worked in the governor's office before and stuff like that.
Interesting.
There's also Dave Layton, the CEO of Layton Construction, so that's kind of a unique area of business, and someone from Zions Bank as well.
So a very eclectic group, yet they all made the same decision.
Yeah, well, really what I think the decision came down to is the numbers. Salt Lake is a great potential host. We have the venues that we can save a ton of money on and things like that. And so I know Wayne Niederhauser, he's the president of Utah Senate I mentioned earlier, he said himself that he's a CPA by profession. Obviously he's the president of Utah Senate now, but he's gone over the numbers several times and he feels they're conservative numbers and he feels very positive about the numbers themselves. And so making sure you do our due diligence, that we have great data to back up some of the things that are in the report is really why I think everyone on the board is unanimous in this decision.
So does this mean 2026 is out of the question completely?
Not particularly. I mean, I know the United States Olympic Committee prefers 2030. The reason for that is because Los Angeles, obviously they're having the 2028 Olympics. They have sponsorship rights for all the domestic sponsorships in the United States, 10 or so years up to their Olympics. And that's where a lot of the revenue from the Olympics come from, is sponsorships. And so it'd be very difficult for any American city to host the 2026 Olympics. But if in years past, like in 2022, for example, there were a lot of European cities that kind of expressed their interest. I believe Oslo, Norway was one, and there's a few others as well. And they all dropped out for one reason or another. And so in 2022, there were only 2 cities that ended up bidding for it. That was Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Which raises the odds quite a bit.
Yeah, that's right. That was Almaty, Kazakhstan, and Beijing, China. And so if something like that, where a bunch of cities drop out, we're ready if that is needed. But the Salt Lake Olympic Committee, as well as the USOC, wants 2030 to avoid the sponsorship conflict with LA.
This is so interesting. So it's official that we're moving forward with the bid. I want to ask about the bidding process, but right now, do we know of any other American and global cities who are officially moving forward with the bid like we are?
Well, I don't think, excuse me, there are no American cities that have a report that we do and have officially decided to bid or not. There are cities that are exploring it. We've mentioned Denver and Reno. They're the ones who specifically are exploring it. But I haven't heard of any global or international cities that have officially are going to bid for it either. But the cities that are interested are Calgary, Canada, Sion, Switzerland, and I think Stockholm, Sweden is another one. There's a few others that I've mentioned previously on the show.
Interesting. Well, I wonder at one point will they be on the same level as we are, because it seems like we're kind of we're head starting the whole group.
Yeah, well, I know that the European cities will probably hold a referendum, and so I know that Sion originally announced that the referendum would be held in June, but now they're saying it might be a little earlier than that.
Yeah, competition.
Yeah, that's right.
We got competition here.
Yeah, so yeah, I think after the referendum there'll be a lot more clear of what they're going to end up doing, and we'll probably bid relatively recently after that. I know that the International Olympic Committee decides on the 2026 host in September of 2019.
Wow. So what do you think 2030 will be like?
Well, that's tough to say, but
seems so far away.
Yeah. Well, given the recent history with the International Olympic Committee, they awarded LA and Paris at the same time, and so it wouldn't be surprising. It wouldn't be surprising at all if they awarded 2026 and 2030 at the same time. Which is the reason that that Salt Lake and the U.S. Olympic Committee want to be involved in 2026, just in case that does happen.
Right.
And so we could see a 2030 announcement as early as September November of 2019
Wow.
or September. I think that happened 7 years before, so 2023 or so.
Still not that far away.
Yeah,
We're talking next year or 5 years.
Yeah, we're coming up on it for sure.
Interesting. Let's talk about the bidding process. We've officially decided we're moving forward, but what does that mean? What happens?
Well, I think for the Salt Lake process itself, the whole Olympic bid process, there's kind of 3 steps, I guess you could say. The first step is kind of the exploratory phase, is probably the best way to say it. That's where, at least in our case, the mayor pictured there, as well as the governor, commissioned they formed the Exploratory Committee itself, and they've been working over the last few months going over data, going over some numbers, looking at different challenges they're going to face with LA and stuff like that, public support, all those sort of things, and then they finally published their report. And so the exploratory phase is kind of over, and that's a picture of the report right there. That's actually Fraser Bullock's copy of the report.
Nice.
So he's on the board, and a prominent member.
We have a copy here too.
Yes, I printed a copy for ourselves, and it's 140 pages long, by the way.
Wow, just light reading.
Yeah, this is this copy itself is double-sided, so don't let the small size fool you. But anyway.
Anyway, so the exploratory phase is done.
Yeah.
What's next?
So the exploratory phase is kind of done, and Fraser Bullock and some other members of the committee are going to go to Pyeongchang and hand deliver this report to the IOC and the USOC.
Wow.
And
a little
so,
personal touch.
yeah, exactly. That's right. And so from that point, the United States Olympic Committee kind of goes through the exploratory phase themselves a little bit, and they need to make a decision if they're going to put forth the 2026 bid by March 31st. And that's a very tight timeline for them, given the Olympics are this year, and so obviously they're going to be involved with Pyeongchang and stuff like that, and they end in February. So they need to make a decision basically in a month.
In a month, wow.
So that's something. And so that's kind of the whole exploratory process, so that's kind of phase 1. Phase 2 is the bid process itself. So if the United States decides to put forth a bid for 2026, and this would apply to 2030 in like 5 years or whatever, then they would have to, so they declare a potential bid city, Salt Lake, whatever, Denver, Reno, and then they basically present their case to the International Olympic Committee. Hey, Salt Lake has the venues, they don't have to spend as much money, they have awesome public support, they have this report, hand in the report, all those sorts of things.
Right.
So once the bid process is complete, the International Olympic Committee gives their decision on it, and then the organizing process begins, which is kind of the third and final phase, which is basically everything from planning the Olympics to actually hosting them, and all the construction and takedown and all the things that happen in between.
So, being that we had the Olympics in 2002, does that put us at lower chances of having the Olympics again, or higher because we already have the venues?
Yeah, well, if you look at the International Olympic Committee, they have something called Agenda 2020, which is something that the new kind of bid process they're going to take. And there's a few things that go into that, like athlete experience and stuff like that. They want to increase the athlete experience. And there's a few other things that go into there, but one of the big things that I mentioned is lowering the cost of the Olympics. Sochi cost $51 billion, for example, and Beijing was $40 billion. And so the cost of the Olympics is extremely high, at least in those cases, and Rio wasn't too far behind, and obviously they're in the billions of dollars. So one of the big things that the IOC wants to do, they don't want cities to have financial problems because of the Olympics, and so if a city can come and be able to save money because of some existing venues, that is very positive in the eyes of the IOC, actually.
Well, I would say so too.
Yeah.
I'm a little biased though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not only do our existing venues help, but we use our existing venues.
It's true.
Our venues are used for trials and events and things like that. US Ski and Snowboard is headquartered in Park City, and US Speed Skating is headquartered in the Olympic Oval in Kearns in Salt Lake. And
so why not?
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
And plus, a lot of athletes probably live down the street.
Yeah.
No lodging for them. They can just sleep in their own bed and go.
Well, I think of this 2018 Olympics, there's like 70 athletes out of the 244 that have a connection to Utah.
Yes. 20% of Team USA.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of a lot of homegrown athletes, and that's one of the things that 2002 really hoped to do, is have these venues for people to experience and practice on, things like that, and hopefully grow the next generation of Olympians, and we're seeing that today.
That's so awesome. Well, Austin, finally, where can people go to follow all the updates on this?
Yeah, so actually the best place to find this is on our social media accounts at SLC 2026-2030. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we were actually the first ones to report that the committee voted unanimously to move forward with the 2030 Olympics.
And we're number 2, right? We're the second ones to report it?
I think the news stations in Salt Lake may have beat you, but pretty close.
Pretty close.
You're up there. So.
Well, we're the first ones today, at least.
Yeah, probably. So that's. I mean, so yeah. So we were the first to report that, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah,
it was a great experience being in the meeting and stuff like that. So you can find all the breaking news related to Salt Lake, and there's a lot of things that will be coming up soon that relates to Salt Lake. If the United States Olympic Committee decides to go for it March 31st or not, that'll be huge for Salt Lake.
Right.
And if Denver and Reno come up with a similar report and stuff like that we have, that'll be another thing that'll affect Salt Lake as well.
We definitely need to be following your social media pages, especially Facebook, Salt Lake City 2026-2030.
That's right.
Awesome. Austin, thank you so much for joining us this morning and giving us all the info we need to know about the coming up Olympics.
Sure.
All right, guys, we have a lot more coming up on the Mountain Morning Show. We're going to wrap up this first hour right after this commercial break.